So welcome to the June 17th meeting of the Kubernetes IoT Edge Working Group on the North American time cycle. We'll start the meeting today. I see the first item on the agenda is cross-community discussion with the OSF Edge Computing Group. I'm not sure who put that on the agenda or wants to take that over, but whoever it is, you're on the call, please go for it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Hey, yeah.
Cool.
Do I need to make you moderator too? I can do that if you've got.
No, I don't think so. I just have a bad connection, so I wasn't sure if you can hear me.
No, it sounds great.
Awesome. If I disappear, then I'm sorry in advance. I will ask David then to take over. I don't see Beth. So I think it was Gergely Csatari who put the agenda item and who synchronized with this group to have this agenda item and kind of explore cross-community collaboration opportunities. We just had a recent developer gathering, a virtual event where we were talking to a couple of communities in the area of Edge, and we're kind of exploring collaboration opportunities. So I think the idea for this agenda item would be to kind of introduce the OSF Edge Computing group to your group and vice versa, and basically see if we have some connection points and some areas where we could work together. We do stuff around defining reference models and architectures and doing testing activities, and started to talk about containers. So kind of seemed like a good time to reach out and see if we might be able to do some things together. So
that sounds great. Maybe
short.
You could give us some background on this OSF group, like when it got started, how large it is, whether it's under a foundation, etc.
Yeah, so I just dropped a link to our wiki. Practically all of our stuff is there or available from there. We also, I will dig up the link. We just published a white paper this Monday that's practically kind of summarizing the work that we are doing. So I will dig up that link too and put it in the chat a little later. But on the wiki, you can find the resources where to find us, a mission statement, our meetings, and all these kind of things. In a nutshell, this group has been active for, I think, around 3 years now. It is a top level kind of a working group under the OpenStack Foundation. So we have a home like that. And our main activities, as I said, are a little bit higher level in terms of we are looking into edge computing use cases. We are not favoring any industry segment. So we are not specializing in anything. However, we were taking a closer look to the telecommunications and 5G aspects of edge, because that's where most of the activities happened so far. But we are not exclusive to that area. And based on the use cases, we are identifying requirements and kind of trying to see how much of the requirements in the different industry segments are common, what kind of error cases and scenarios the different use cases, or well, the architectures need to be prepared for in the different use cases. And based on our learnings, we have 2 reference models, and we are working on building reference architectures. Based on that, we started with looking into how to put it together from OpenStack services. We have a kind of a minimalistic reference architecture view, and as I mentioned, we started to look into containerized workloads as well, and containerized edge sites also, and reaching out to the Kubernetes community where the experts are. And with the reference architectures, we are also looking into testing activities. So kind of trying to figure out if what we put together actually does work and does the job or not. And along the way, we are basically sharing what we learned with any community that's interested in it. So we are also not exclusive to OpenStack as a technology or the OpenStack Foundation projects as projects to collaborate with. So we would like to really share our learnings with all the industry and anyone who's interested in it, and also work together with those individuals and organizations where it makes sense and where there are some connection points. I can really quickly introduce those reference models, or we can also go ahead and see if there's any questions from anyone so far, or...
Does anybody have any questions?
This is Cindy. I'm curious, like, what kind of use cases you've accumulated in high level, and then the link to the doc will be helpful.
I think she put the link to the doc in the chat, and it's also in the group meeting notes. I was looking at it when I, well, she was talking, and there is a section there called use cases.
Yeah,
Here,
we have a separate wiki page for the use cases. I dropped in the link to the Zoom chat as well.
Okay,
to that one.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
As I said, our main focus were around 5G and UCP type of use cases, because that's where deployments are happening currently. But we also talked about all sorts of things like, I don't know, drones or autonomous vehicles. There are also more and more industrial IoT use cases coming up as well. So we are looking into those also, but we didn't have a lot of details to the use cases in other industry segments until kind of recently. I also dropped a link to the recent white paper that we published. There are a few use cases in there too. There's a 5G one, there's an aquaculture one, shrimp farms, an industrial IoT one, and I think a CD and a content delivery network one in it. So I think that's a kind of a good coverage in terms of industry segments to which we had some access to so far. Does this answer your question?
Yes, yeah, this is very cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions? Or
I do. I have a question. This is Kit Plummer at Georgia Tech. Are you doing any work to abstract out like the common attributes from these things to collect maybe sort of universal functional, non-functional requirements?
Yes, we started that activity. I think what we need to do in some extent is to go back to those industry segments who are kind of catching up and starting to deploy some infrastructures as well, and see if we can get some more details, because some of our use cases are more detailed and some are, well, all that we could get at the time when it came up. But the goal is definitely to try to see how we could come up with solutions in the open source ecosystem that fulfills multiple use cases as opposed to only specializing for one. Especially because I think edge computing infrastructures are kind of going organically, and there's the operator network, and the operator network will be shared with multiple entities as well. So we can't really say that there is one entity with one solution and that works for them and that will work for everyone else too who has something similar, and those will never be connected ever. I think looking into stuff like interoperability will be way more crucial than ever, and just kind of all the things that we had under the rugs in the time of having distributed systems, we will need to deal with those when we are having massively distributed systems. And any help with this activity, or if we could do that together with other groups, I think that would benefit all of us, so we don't have to do all these exercises in parallel multiple times, is the idea.
You mentioned that you are working on use cases or architectural overviews that kind of give some kind of guideline for edge devices. Is this right, or what exactly is the plan on that?
So our group so far focused more on kind of infrastructure as a service layer type of services and solutions. So we kind of excluded the far edge devices, like I don't know, the Raspberry Pis and the smart sensors and these kind of small devices. We looked into these things in the extent of there is a bare metal as a service project in OpenStack, and there was kind of a sub project to it. I think it was a university project where they started to work on how to make that project, the functionality available for IoT devices as well. So it's not true that we did not look into it at all, but so far our focus was closer to the IaaS layer and services, just kind of trying to limit our scope somewhere.
So is it fair to say that since you're affiliated with OpenStack, that you just went at use cases that had enough compute resource to act as an OpenStack managed node?
I don't think that's true. Well, how to put this? So our scope was never exclusive to OpenStack, but we kind of, so if you look into a typical edge architecture, you have some kind of central data center or cloud or some bigger entity. And our view was kind of how to extend that big cloud out to the edge, as opposed to focusing just on the edge itself, if that makes sense. So in that extent,
so I guess you have a cloud, but you can use gateways to get out to external things that aren't literally part of the cloud, then, is what I gather you're saying. Okay.
Well, you have one cloud and then you have multiple clouds connecting to it. So I think our extent was you have at least some kind of a blade or server or a box big enough to run infrastructure type of services. If that's OpenStack, then it's OpenStack. If it's not OpenStack, then something else. Yeah, we really just did not go down to that level when the infrastructure services are not part of the game anymore.
Yeah, the thing I'd add would be the kind of two architectures that like high-level architectures that we were looking at was having a single distributed cloud, a single cloud that was distributed. So one control plane and worker nodes or compute nodes that were distributed geographically. And then the other architecture that we were looking at was having multiple clouds that were geographically distributed. So having a central standalone cloud that did orchestration of standalone subclouds that were geographically distributed. And so the subclouds were full control plane of their own. And like I said, the central cloud provided, orchestration activities with respect to, synchronizing common data and that sort of stuff. And in one of the, I work in the Starlingx group that does the multiple clouds distributed type architecture, and we started out originally just with kind of an OpenStack solution, but we've moved to a Kubernetes-based solution with OpenStack containerized on top of it. So you can actually have a distributed cloud, a distributed multi-cloud solution with some subclouds, like very small, running just Kubernetes, and some subclouds larger, running OpenStack.
Okay, I think it's fair to say that within the Kubernetes community, by my observation anyway, we've had people take multiple approaches to kind of a big umbrella dispersed picture, anything from running Kubernetes clusters at edge locations, which is fine if you've got enough resource to do it, but not every use case does, to having one cloud in the world managing dispersed Kubernetes worker nodes. And we had a group from this Sundew project come on about 2-3 months ago talking about that in a university research environment where they were federating individual cluster nodes from people who had resource around the world, but centrally managing them. And that project was kind of an interesting presentation. Within Kubernetes itself, I think there's an independent working group that addresses federating Kubernetes clusters. So this group maybe isn't, it certainly is a point where that comes up, but it probably isn't the only one. But it's an interesting topic. I looked through the link posted, and I noticed one of the challenges it said you were taking on was load balancing across geographically distributed hardware. And that would be that Sundew use case of people trying to use Kubernetes for that. But yeah, I think there is a lot of overlap here. A few of the things I saw called out that I'm kind of curious about if you found anything, because we haven't had any speakers here or people address this, is dealing with this challenge of storage out at edge. You know, it's sometimes when you're resource constrained and dollar constrained, coming up with resilient storage good enough to run stateful apps and cover some of the use cases of, you know, getting around single points of failure are kind of an interesting challenge with Kubernetes now. And if you've come across any ideas or solutions, I think, I don't know, I'm personally interested, but I suspect there would be broad interest in that. And then some other topic that came up, I mean, your challenges talks about load balancing across geo-distributed. In Kubernetes, often the term load balancer is kind of used with a different flavor. There's a load balancer resource in Kubernetes that in a public cloud was usually the way that you'd publish some service that is exposed in your cluster publicly so that you could get added externally, you know, maybe from the public internet or maybe just from an external network. And people have been asking about load balancer solutions when you drop a Kubernetes cluster out at an edge location too, because, you know, if you run in a public cloud, the cloud provider does that as a service and you don't even worry about it. In legacy data centers, that might have been some big F5, but those are so expensive that if you have thousands of edge locations, you're maybe want to, an open source solution that could pull that off. Anyway, I'll see if anybody else has any comments.
I was just gonna,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say, like, with respect to the load balancing, I should have mentioned that, yeah, like the Kubernetes solution that the Starlingx project has with an OpenStack is Kubernetes on bare metal. So yeah, you're right that we don't have a good solution yet for like load balancing. Like we don't use the metal. I know there's a metal load balancer, I think, in Kubernetes that's available for Kubernetes. We don't use that yet. We've looked at it a bit. I don't know if you guys have any opinion on it, but
well, yeah, it's come up that it's metal LB, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it was popular, but one of the issues I've heard people cite is that it was started by kind of one of these projects where there's a dominant developer who wasn't doing it as his day job and announced that he was walking away from the project. And I think that has caused a lot of people to be a bit concerned about that as a long-term solution. Yet it does strike me as extremely popular.
Yeah.
There are a few other ones out there, but I think it's definitely an area that calls out for maybe a better solution than what people have discovered so far.
Yeah, so we're looking for one, because the only solution we have to that is really, like, we use Calico as our CNI, and like, you know how, I haven't done it myself, but you know how you're supposed to be able to run BGP within Calico, and then you could advertise your service subnets or whatever across through BGP advertisements. But I suspect the outage times would be slower. Or larger. The outage times would be larger on it.
Yeah, I think you're right, because Metal LB has an option of working either at an L2 level where it does simulates additional MAC addresses down at the low level, or it can use BGP. But I believe I've seen in the docs a recommendation that using BGP has slower switchover times. So
yeah.
it might be inherent to using that as a solution. There's
Yeah.
sort of poor person's techniques of like using DNS to sort of do it too, but that could be like really slow.
Yeah, so we haven't got a good solution for that yet. The other comment I was just going to say about your comment about persistent storage at the edge. I mean, we have deployments that range from, well, for Starlingx project, we have deployments that range from like a single server solution, you know, master and worker node, and you know, we can fit on a super micro type 8-core system, stuff like that. Or and then for persistent storage, well, we range from that single little server to separate master control cluster and you know, large, I don't know, 100 nodes, 100 worker nodes, stuff, sort of thing. But for all our deployments, we're actually using Ceph as our backend for PVCs. And so that includes the little AIO server. You know, you could have multiple OSDs on that single AIO server, or you can deploy 2 AIO servers to kind of provide HA, and then have you know, Ceph OSDs on both with replication between them. That's
I think all the solutions kind of that evolved out of the virtualization and hypervisor era that would get where resource is like a half rack of equipment, that's sort of a solved problem. But if you get down to Raspberry Pis, you know, like 2 of them or 3 Raspberry Pis, running these software-defined storage solutions we have now is sort of problematic. First of all, they might only have gigabit Ethernet. So even if in theory you could make clustered storage out of 3 Pis, running that over gigabit Ethernet is going to have really low performance, you know, like way lower performance than even rotating media consumer SATA drive. And maybe there's better solutions now that some of those tiny boxes are getting USB 3, but I've yet to come across one. It's an interesting area to me. If in your project you've ever encountered anything that deals with that kind of really low budget, low resource thing of 3 Pis or 3 NUCs.
Yeah, no, we haven't got down to that, although I know within Starlingx, and I think even within the Edge Computing group, we're interested in looking at kind of the next level down, like the you know, actually device level edge components. But we haven't done a lot of work in that area yet.
Now, I've done OSDs on, I use Ceph on SBCs, small single boards, and actually built edge level clusters that way using Ceph. The performance is not that bad, depending upon the type of single board you get and what kind of storage mechanism you're using. But it's also dependent on what you're trying, you know, what from a data standpoint, what you're trying to do there. So in our particular instance, we were using, it's basically real time time series data that was coming back from sensors. And it was more than, and because of our architecture, the way it's designed, it was one that was acceptable. I mean, it wasn't a performance bottleneck at all. But like anything, your mileage may vary depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But we have done that, and we've been fairly successful with kind of remoting stuff out to the edge.
What was your interface to the sensors? Is it something standard or?
Oh, yeah, it was Ethernet. Basically, it's a TCP protocol that's designed specifically to the vertical that we were in, C37.118, which was, and these are high volume sensors. These are generally sampling at 30 hertz or higher. So it's quite a bit of data coming back.
I suppose for that time series data and sensors, another way to address storage, it isn't storage per se, but using Kafka is both a combination of event-driven messaging, but persistence thrown in the mix too. So that might be another solution for that. But I think when it comes to storage at edge, it's not just like redundancy, but the issue where these are unattended locations or locations where you don't have highly trained IT personnel, like put a Kubernetes cluster into a fast food sandwich shop or something like that. And even though the storage is theoretically redundant, if it requires an expert to go recover it when a device fails, that isn't really a workable solution. So, you know, there's aspects of this that beyond just the performance.
Yeah. Right now, I'm actually playing with IPFS. That one is fascinating me in regards to distributed file system capabilities, and integrating them more directly into Kubernetes would be intriguing. But IPFS is an interesting.
Well, that sounds interesting. If you have the notes document open, maybe you can paste a link to that. I haven't encountered that myself.
Sure, I can do that.
Is anybody working non-traditional interface access from edge devices like I2C, SPI, or other things that might require different levels of access from a container to the lower level interfaces?
I've yet tried running containers with FPGAs, but that's actually quite hard to do. I got started with working just with USB. So you just kind of install the driver, and then you give host access to the whole container, which of course is not the, let's say, safest thing to do, but it kind of gets the stone rolling. Yeah, the FPGA thing is still on our plate. So that's basically the next step we want to take. But I don't see why SPI should be any different than USB. So
it isn't. It's the same security issue. You're having to open up.
Yeah, I thought about like using some kind of driver system or something like that for that, so that you can like bubble up the whole SPI interface or the USB interface. But I'm not quite sure how to get this going.
I'm by no means an expert, but it turns out I've been playing around with this just on a personal level, trying to get home automation running in my house. And been doing this for all of 2 weeks. So be real careful about what I say, because like I say, I'm definitely underlined not an expert. But I am running a home automation thing called Home Assistant in Kubernetes. And at first I tried getting it running standard Kubernetes. And also another complication I'll point out, I'm running it on top of a hypervisor, not bare metal. I did get it to work, but some of the problems were routing the I/O. I was using USB, and there was a way to punch the USBs through the hypervisor and on up into a Kubernetes cluster node. But then it was sort of felt like you were fighting the Kubernetes scheduler rather than doing it any favors, because it really had to be on one particular cluster node that was hosted on one particular hypervisor node to get that routing to go through. And it did work, but I came up with plan B that seemed to work better, and that was that I found a lot of packages that would convert these IO devices, and definitely USB is in there. Z-Wave was another. I'm quite sure I saw the I2CC. I saw Bluetooth Low Energy routed to first MQTT. And what I ended up doing was bringing up a small Pi, not even a Pi 4, but an old Pi 3 I had laying around with, you know, kind of smallish memory. But it was perfectly capable of hosting these kinds of IO. I put the Z-Wave interface, USB interface in there. It already had built-in Bluetooth. And the software to take that IO and publish it via MQTT to a Mosquito broker worked fine. In fact, I'm hosting the Mosquito broker on the same Pi. And then my Kubernetes apps that deal with that IO are running it on Kubernetes, and they're fully flexible as to where they run. So if the characteristics of MQTT are something you can deal with, which, you know, may have latency challenges or bandwidth challenges, that solution seems quite workable. And the nice thing about it is I found just the biggest problem wasn't that I couldn't find examples of open source projects that published and dealt with these IO devices and gateways. There were just too many of them. You know, you'd look for Bluetooth solutions and there had to be a dozen. And it felt like, you know, one that was obvious and great that the world had gotten behind might be easier for a newcomer. But then again, having a dozen means that maybe they, you know, independently move on and develop. So not criticizing it, I'm just warning you that I think the solution is out there, but there might be a lot of evaluation to be done, just sorting out all the stuff that's out there.
Can you share some of them that you tried and worked? I mean, it doesn't have to be now. You can put it in the docs. I mean,
yeah, at the meeting last time, I actually gave an impromptu demo of what I had so far, and I've got it further along. Maybe this is a future meeting of this group. I can, once I think that I've sort of optimized this, I'll give a presentation on it.
I think that's if nothing else, it's an opportunity, specifically on the IoT side of Edge IoT, is, you know, addressing how you provide maybe universally to containers within a Kubernetes deployment access to the lower level interfaces. And yeah, in the IoT game, like, you know, it's like a smorgasbord of devices, right? So all, you know, every little sensor, every little thing has, you know, every different code, you know, every language environment has at least 4 attempts at making it work, and, you know, digging through all that. But from a container perspective, it makes it really interesting, because then you're not necessarily tied to Python or whatever language it was implemented in. And
yeah, I think the container world with IoT maybe is more viable if you just have one single node, because you're piercing so many levels. The other thing I didn't point out, it not only was that you get tied down to a specific node on Kubernetes or on a hypervisor, but on Kubernetes, to get to that IO device, you had to run in privileged mode, or specifically call out, you know, go to the trouble to designate what devices were allowed. And running privileged mode is maybe going to be troublesome to many, if not most people on Kubernetes, or maybe it should be troublesome, whether it is or not. With that might just be people aren't aware of what risk they're taking. But I think that a lot of these IO devices, you know, the home ones are newer, but when you get into industry, some of that stuff has 10, 20-year life cycles. So you're forced to deal and live with ancient technology with proprietary hardware, and the gateway has always been how that industry lived, and I think that isn't likely to change. And I think this design philosophy of accept that you have these physically locked down gateways that are at known locations, and known locations maybe is easier for securing them, is what you live with. And when you get to the higher tiers of applications, the things that might run your machine learning, your AI, data processing and analysis, those, the Kubernetes solution or OpenStack or some other thing might make sense. They do typically have deterministically scheduled workloads, so they could run on node A today, but node B an hour later. And that is problematic if those deal with I/O. So the gateway is kind of an intermediary is, I think, a solution as long as you have enough budget space, et cetera, to go with having multiple pieces of hardware.
There's an approach that we've taken with the Eclipse IOFog project, which is to try to have edge microservices that can be instantiated as your interface layers. We have one for GPIO for your common pin flipping operations, right? I'm going to turn on an LED or this type of stuff, or trigger an actuator. And we've abstracted it away to a REST interface. And so when you do need access to the GPIO, that container has privileged operations, of course, right, to talk to the low-level stuff. But the way it exposes it up is actually manageable even down to like an API key level if you want to give microservices the opportunity to talk to it or not talk to it. And then everything that you do filters through one management interface. So it's possible to kind of keep tight control of the chips. We haven't done it yet for I2C or for SPI, but there's no reason that it couldn't follow the same pattern. The question is, does it make sense for REST? Probably not for those. So we also did serial ports, RS-485 and all the other common variants where you attach to a WebSocket, and then that way you're talking to serial port over WebSocket, which is really easy to implement from, you can even do like Ruby at the edge without much pain. But then again, we've got that control over it, and where it's found in the hardware is diverse. The main point is that you use a microservice to do the hardware abstraction. So you don't have these microservices running till you need them. And Mord's mentioned working with FPGAs. It's like the same thing. You want to flash the FPGA, that can run by the edge agent when you need it, and then it gets out of your way. But not every edge instance needs this, right? So you have a bare minimum agent, and then it pulls down what it needs for the hardware abstraction is kind of the concept.
I'm going to give a time box warning. I think Cindy may have put this on the agenda, but we are slated to talk about the SurveyMonkey survey of use cases. So how about 6 more minutes on the OSF Edge Computing topic and anything that's come up so far while we're discussing this?
I think
the main
back
thing
to the...
Sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
Hey, so back to the topic, I like the two groups collaboration, especially like sharing the use cases and then reference architecture. So for your reference, or you can watch the previous KubeCon talks, we addressed how we are viewing of the edge computing and then the reference architecture or the technical challenges. So personally, I would really like to hear from you guys, like what are the key technical problems you are trying to address? Because like, I think from today's meeting, I've heard several things about highly distributed load balancing, or like how do you like manage the state on the edge devices through some storage or something like this. I think would be really helpful. Like the two teams can collaborate and then leverage our strength. I think from an OpenStack perspective, building the IaaS, you guys have already built a lot of expertise. We can all share together. That's how I'm viewing. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, I put the link in the Zoom chat to the reference models and architectures, and Greg was also describing them. So what we started to look into on very high levels is the centralized and distributed models in terms of how much autonomy an edge site needs. and kind of was taking things from there and trying to figure out that what happens when you get network connection loss between the more central sites and the edge, and what functionality needs to be available and these kind of things. Now, I think again, if you look into the diagrams on the wiki, they are more cloud centric, but I think we can definitely look into how to connect the edge devices into it as well, and what you need there. We just started discussions around storage, for example. So we were thinking about the block storage aspects as you do it for a cloud, and then we also started to look into object storage and just kind of different types of challenges in that area. So we don't necessarily have a lot of answers to those questions yet, but it's something that we just started to look into as well. So I think collaboration in those areas would be really, really good. And the other thing that I think we could also talk about, not on this meeting, but longer term, is if you do any type of testing and evaluation activities, and if we could connect those in some extent and do some joint activities in that area. So kind of we come up with some cool ideas and see if they actually work. That was the other area that we wanted to bring up from our side, if kind of a question, if you do that, or if you're interested in activities like that.
Sure. Yeah, hey, Dan, I think I disrupted you earlier. Like, you want to say something?
No, it was a question.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it would be great to do something like that. So what I wanted to say earlier is that I think this cross-community thing is great, and what we should try to do in the next 6 minutes that Steve gave us is to figure out what's the best way to hold the future meetings and how to continue this. I mean, it was great, a basic introduction and a general discussion, but you know, how we proceed, what are the next first step we can do, and when.
Yeah, one thing I want to share is, like, in our working group, from time to time, people will bring in some projects like they've been doing. So potentially, I think that could be shared. I hope, like, you probably do something similar you can share to us as well. Like, say, do some demo, explain like what kind of problems you're trying to address, and then the solutions. And then we can learn from each other. That's a thought.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that. We aren't doing a lot of demos lately, as we started to discuss some new areas for us. So I'm also kind of wondering how we can follow each other's activities in terms of maybe have some more participation in meetings of like either some of the Edge Computing Group's members are joining this call, or sometimes you join our weekly calls. We have it on Tuesdays, I believe 8 a.m. Pacific every week. So when we have relevant topics on the agendas that would make sense to discuss together, I think that would also be good to do. So, like, for instance, when we were talking about storage, maybe it would make more sense to involve the other group, because you're talking about storage too, and there's probably a large overlap in that topic between our areas and on the solution side as well.
Sure. I think in my mind, like this group, I feel we are more focusing on the platform as a service. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm making some assumptions here. Okay. But from what I heard, you are more building the underlying infrastructure. So, but from a scenario perspective, there are a lot of common things. Definitely, I think we can work together and make it happen.
Sounds good. I don't know if anyone has any further thoughts or ideas on collaboration or ways to collaborate most efficiently.
Do you have like meeting notes or meeting minutes like what we are doing here? So if you can share and even propose the agenda for that week's meeting, then we can have an idea and then join you or whatever.
So we maintain the agenda on the wiki, and we have some meeting recordings, and we are logging the main discussion points on IRC, and I can dig up the logs for that.
Okay.
Jack.
Okay.
I assume the document that you shared at the beginning.
Yeah,
of
that's the one
that's
Steve
your,
shared.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
yours. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the main one, and then the Slack channel is the main communication channel. So I think going forward, we can just keep in touch and try to sync from time to time. And when some interesting topic comes up, I mean, we can always use some of our slots or your slots to dig deeper into a specific topic, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to set up anything separate. I think we all have enough meetings. So I don't want to create yet another one. So yeah, we should definitely do that.
Okay. So do we want to switch the topic? Like I can quickly say something.
Yeah, I think you better because we've got 10 minutes
sure.
left.
So I think the SurveyMonkey idea or survey idea was originally coming up when we do the KubeCon Europe back in, I think in May or March, I forgot. So, and then given all the conferences are virtual now, so I'm thinking it's a good idea, given CNCF supports us to do some survey. I can reach out to the relevant folk again to say, allow us to do some survey. Last time, I created a document mainly focusing on the application workload area, about the nature of the workload, what kind of tools people are using, tech challenges people are facing, those kind of things. It's shared on the Slack channel.
Maybe it's so old that you should repost it, Cindy.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I think we've got a lot of newcomers with 22 people here today, at least half I don't remember seeing before. So let's give them some background.
Yeah.
What we were talking about was back before COVID, we were planning on having a meeting of users at the KubeCon Europe event. And we've had these meetings, call them informal birds of a feather, at the KubeCon events all over the world for the past couple of years. And we find that the users divide up into kind of camps of industrial IoT, telco, device edge, retail edge, et cetera. And they have things in common, but also things that are different. And we had this idea that we wanted to conduct a survey to just see what is of interest out there. And the idea was that we can get the CNCF to send out this survey to their entire mailing list and see what responses we get. And we're trying to compose a survey. It can't be gigantic because then people won't take it. You have to time box it where you can honestly say in the email, will you please take this 10-minute survey and ask them some questions. But we're trying to compose the questions to gather some assessment of what people out there in the world are interested in. So back to you, Cindy.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you, Steve, for the background. I think given we are all working from home, I somehow feel like it's an advantage. We got some advantage to allow people think hard and fill in, because in the conference people are interacting, they don't have much time to fill in the survey. So it's a good time for us to collectively know what people are thinking, what's the refresh people's mind, like, or collect what the challenges they are facing, and then we can tackle, like all of us can tackle the problems together. So that's the thought. So as what Steve suggested, I will resend the survey information. Please take a look and then provide your input and feedback. And then after that, like if we can finalize our version and send to the CNCF. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been through these surveys before. I did one in the storage SIG. So I'd suggest what we start out with is anybody who's curious or wants a question answered, let's compose a giant list, and then we'll prioritize them, and hopefully we'll get more than we can fit, but then we'll sort them out to get the best ones. Maybe we'll have a meeting for that, but when Cindy puts it in the Slack channel, if you've got ideas for questions you're curious about that would benefit from having exposure and feedback from the community, let's try for 100 questions and boil it down to the best 10 or something.
Yeah, I like that. Especially today, I heard a lot of new terms or new projects like IPFS or like the FPGA pane, or you're using some like special protocol or hardware devices. Those are really helpful.
So do we have a deadline for the survey? It's for the virtual Kubernetes EU, right?
So the
August?
Europe is scheduled in mid of August. So I think if we can finish or consolidate by end of July, I think we should be good. Yeah, let's target end of July.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about using it for when we were looking at a physical event, but we can still do it for a virtual.
Yes.
So if we can identify the groups with common interests that have critical mass, we could declare like online's birds of a feather, where we can just have group members host a Zoom. And if we've got a dozen people from telco interested in Kubernetes, even this is probably too late to make it an official event on the KubeCon schedule, but there's no reason we can't publish this independently or talk about it during our maintainer track session, and give people a forum to meet others who are kind of trying to solve the same issue and build a community around it. And with regard to the, the visitors today from, we've got visitors, I think, from Eclipse and OpenSec Foundation. I think we're open to making this a big picture where maybe if you've got any official capacity in these alternate foundations, we could, the survey is likely to be just a link, and we can send out the link under the auspices of other groups as well.
I really like this idea. I think I saw Tina, so she's from Acrino as well. So looks like we have quite some audience, like from different organizations. Let's share the idea. We can do the survey. Yeah, I think like we three of us are here, the kind of like a facilitator. If you guys have any like ideas or things we could help, just let us know. Yeah.
Yeah, I am the Tina she talked about. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hey. Hey.
Yeah, there are many IoT Edge related blueprints in Acrino. We are happy to incorporate any CNCF project, like integrate as an upstream components. So far, like Kubernetes Edge, Kubernetes, Cilian, MY, or be integrated in this or that blueprint.
Cool. Thank you, Tina.
No problem.
Okay, that's what I have.
Okay, we still have 3 minutes. Does anybody have any last minute things they want to throw out there?
I just want to call out the whole OpenStack community, if you ever have a presentation related to the Edge and IoT and want to do a presentation to this group, like I would personally like to see Starlingx and what's going on there and things like that. We are always open, so just put it on the agenda or propose it on the Slack channel and
Yeah, forgot to mention, there is a Starlingx distributed cloud blueprint, which was part of release 2 and 1 before, but now in this upcoming release 3. So it's already integrated Starlingx there in Equino blueprint. If you want to be part of release 4, this is the right time.
And I'll reach out again too, if anybody, Tina, I think maybe this is your first time on the call, but if there's anything related to a Crano that intersects Kubernetes and you wanted to talk about it to the participants in this group, please put it on the agenda doc for a future meeting, and we're always looking for material. Thanks.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same, Steve. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can give a like a brief intro what is blueprint, how it works, and bring up the Starlingx blueprint and the Kubernetes Edge blueprint.
Cool. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, if anyone can put into agenda for me, I can do it next week or the week after. It's up to your agenda need.
Okay, so our group meets on 2-week cycles, but in different days and times. So we've got one series of meetings that was intended for Eastern Europe, Asia Pacific, and another at a time convenient for North America. You're currently in the North America meeting, and we'll have another one 4 weeks from now.
For 4 weeks? Okay.
Right.
All right.
But in 2 weeks, we'll have one for the other cycle. But if you're in California, it will be in the middle of the night for you. So you can take your pick.
I'll pick it one in 1 month.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, you have plenty of time to prepare.
Cindy, do you have her contact information? Maybe you can put
I
on
do.
the agenda. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
I just wanted to say to Ildiko that I don't see Greg on the call anymore. He's from the Starlingx community. So if there's any interest in any details of the project, I can check in with him as well, so that he could come and present, or find someone else from the community who could give you some details on any interesting bits and pieces.
Okay, that sounds, I think we'll take you up on the offer if it's fair to offer on somebody else's behalf. Maybe you can confirm. But yeah, our group is operating pretty informally, so we don't want to really be gatekeepers. So far, we've thrown it out there for any member who wants to put something on the agenda, and it hasn't really been abused. You know, we don't really want to see someone come on with a pitch for a commercial product, but it hasn't happened. And I think we'll just go with this. So anybody out there, even if you've got a hobby project or something that you want to tell others about, go for it and put it on the agenda. So last call, we're 1 minute after the hour, but we started a couple minutes late, so I guess that's fair. But last call for anybody else who wants to bring something out. Okay, gone. I'm going to stop the recording, and on the North American cycle, we'll see you in 4 weeks. And for really hardcore people who catch both cycles, we'll see you in about 2 weeks. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Thank you.